Welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Lee Hunt, the Chair of the Planning Committee. Please be assured that we have put appropriate... Is there feedback somewhere? Please be assured that we have put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in a COVID-secure manner. This has included a request for all attendees to have taken a lateral flow test within 48 hours of the meeting, the use of NHS Track and Trace app or the attendee log. And we're keeping 2 meters social distancing, the wearing of masks when not seated, a one-way system in the Guildhall and a temperature check upon arrival. Limited public seating has been made available, however this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. Can I ask members to remain seated throughout the duration of the meeting and to wear a face covering unless seated? Please only use the seats marked with a green circle. These seats have been allocated to ensure the 2 meters distancing. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. And then we're going to go around and make the introductions. Okay, so you know who I am. So if we start from the right, go around the top, come back to here, then go back via Alan, and then to Councillor Stubbs, and that way, and then we'll get round. Okay, off we go.
Good morning all, I'm Juliette Gill, I'm the Principal Planning Solicitor at Portsmouth City Council.
You'd like to introduce yourself at the back, sir? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Alex Tarrant. I'm speaking on behalf of John and Jude Tarrant, who are my parents who are ill and can't make it today, but I'm their son. I also work at the business, which
Thank you.
is involved in planning.
Hi, my name is Jamie Hanna. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant on the 62 to 60 Middle Street application.
Thank you, Jamie. Madam?
Hello, I'm Bernie Topham, Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the University of Portsmouth.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Mark Harris from Freeths. I'm here to represent the University of Portsmouth in relation to the Victoria Park planning application.
Jane.
I'm Jane Dodino, Local Democracy Officer.
Hello, I'm Simon Turner, Planning Officer.
Hello, I'm Edward Chapman-Selton, Development Management Team Leader.
Alan Banting, Planning Team Leader.
Luke Stubbs, Councillor and Committee Member, and I'm standing in for Councillor Atkins at this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Stubbs. Adrian, good morning.
Morning. Adrian Rosier, Service Manager for Parks and Open Spaces, Portsmouth City Council.
Morning. Jim Bevan from Savile speaking in support of the application for the Border Control Post.
Good morning. Councillor George Fielding, Committee Member.
Councillor Robert New, Committee Member.
Councillor John Smith, Committee Member.
To you, Chris.
Good morning, Chair. Chris Atwell, Committee Member and Vice Chair.
Good morning, Joe Hooper, Committee Member.
Morning, Dave Ashmore, one of the councillors. I'm standing in for Gerald Vernon Jackson.
Councillor Lindstag, Committee Member.
Thank you all very much. So, Jane, have I got a running list here?
No, Chair, you've got the agenda and the deputation list.
Yeah. Okay, so we've done the apologies as we went around. Any members' interests at all in today's meeting? Good. And the minutes of the previous meeting, I wasn't here, not well. But I did pick up on, so anybody want to talk about those minutes? No, I read through them, I picked up on an HMO, which was it Craneswater Avenue? It's in the minutes. From the time before, which is mentioned in the minutes. You don't have to bother about it now, gents. The thing is, what I'd like to know, because the planning inspector, and I wasn't here to ask last time, the planning inspector supported the committee's or the council's view on communal space in the particular application, and we've been testing these communal spaces rigorously through the members. So I think in future I'd like to know whether the officers recommended approval of the application and how it came to be that the planning inspector supported our position on the communal space in these individual matters, or does not. Because members look at great detail in these things now, room sizes and communal spaces, so the feedback needs to be a little bit more. Okay. Are there any updates on previous applications?
Yes.
Do you want to just hit the mic, Ed?
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding Ezzy's absence, he's advised me that there have been no appeal decisions in the last 30 days and 15 appeals have been lodged.
How many, sorry?
15.
Thank you.
Chair, would you mind if the officer just puts it closer to the microphone, please, and repeats that? I can't minute it.
Indeed. That's good advice for all of us, you know. Talk to the microphone. She'd like you to just move the mic a bit forward, Ed, if you can. Or move your chair towards the microphone.
So no appeal decisions over the last 30 days and 15 appeals lodged over the last 30 days.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed. So we move on now to the planning applications, and the first one is a property...
Chair, sorry, has anyone approved the minutes from last meeting?
I beg your pardon, I was rambling on. Can I get somebody to show that they agree the minutes? Councillor Atwell?
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you very much. Is everybody agreed? Thank you, Councillor Stagg. So they're agreed. Thank you very much indeed. So on page 27, agenda item 5 is to start the reports. So the first one is 2 Prospect Road, which is the QA one, which we looked at a little while ago. You remember we put I'm sure you've all read it, a boundary of trees, but they come along to say, can we please discharge that?
Sorry, Chair, you're jumping ahead. This is the
thank you.
border control post.
You're dead right, I beg your pardon. Thank you very much for that. I'm glad you're here, Councillor Fielding. Right. So it's the border post application. Who's doing this one, gents? Alan, of course you are, yeah. Okay, over to you then, Alan.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. We'll just get the PowerPoint presentation. First slide, please. If I can mention, there are a couple of internal consultees' comments on the update sheets. I'll come to that after I've gone through the PowerPoint slides. So the site is on the west side of Mile End Road. At the moment, well, it was formerly some land that had stacked containers, typically 4 or 5 high, that you can see in one of those images. The red line is not all that easy to see because of other sort of extraneous information that's on there, but it's sort of just under 3/4 of a hectare. Next slide, please. Now, I included this slide to show the relationship of the site to heritage assets that are on the east side of Mile End Road. So, on the right-hand side of that image is the former air balloon public house. It's 400 metres from the site. Just above just above the former air balloon there, you can see an image. There are existing trees, wide sort of grass verges, carriageway, and the sort of raised part of the Rudmore flyover. You can't see the application site from that particular listed building. Then in the middle, you've got Market House Tavern, aka Ferry Lodge. That is about, it's showing you 80 metres between the application site and Ferry Lodge. And then on the left-hand side is Mile End Road Conservation Area, which also has listed buildings, some 120 metres from the application site. The report offers the view that there's no significant intervisibility between the site and those heritage assets. I've included a sort of series of images, and unfortunately they've come out a little bit dark there. The way that you sort of view the setting of those heritage assets is very much, the Mile End Road is quite a barrier to that. The only way of getting across Mile End Road is via the subway. So the report offers a view that there is no significant impact by this development on those heritage assets. So the proposal is for an L-shaped building. It's for a border control post, and the application also seeks use of the application site as land for port purposes. This border control post will provide a government inspection facility at the gateway of entries of goods into a trade area relating to animal welfare, public health and environmental health. The other piece of information I've included on that slide is key policy PCS 11 relating to employment land, and in relation to the commercial port, the policy is for the City Council to protect land at the port for uses directly related to the operational requirements of the port, and this proposal is fully in accord with that particular policy. Now, I've included these images just to give you a little bit of an overview of the shape and form of the building before I then show you the individual elevations. So if you sort of have that in mind when I then sort of skip through the next elevations. So this is on the east side of the building that is already sort of progressing to having a roof, and much of the cladding completed on some of the elevations. So this is the part of the building that you can see in that 3D southeast view facing onto the Mile End Road. That image was taken last Thursday, so it's pretty up to date. This is the north elevation, so this faces onto Kettering Terrace and the Shell petrol filling station beyond it. I want to include sort of two images. It sort of looks a bit like the ridge height is different, but obviously that's just sort of a trick of perspective. The ridge heights of both of those that you can see on those end gables are a maximum height of 15 metres. This is the south elevation, and you've got two images there, one taken from, on the left-hand side, from Prospect Road, and the other from Princess Royal Way. And finally, the west elevation, that obviously is the least complete at the moment, has a series of loading bays, and it faces into the port. Now, I've included these images and an extract from the applicant's transport statement. HGVs or other vehicles that have to go to the inspection facilities will arrive at the port and follow the blue line. Because of the way that that vehicles exiting are prevented from turning right, the vehicles will need to go around Rodmore roundabout, doing effectively a U, before then joining the carriageway within the remainder of the port estate to get to the inspection facility. Obviously, it's slightly less tortuous, the green route, for the exit route for that freight. But you'll see those. It's expected that there will be 67 freight movements on a peak day, and you'll see from your report that it is not considered to have any significant impact on the local highway network. Just a final image of the site from across Mile End Road. So obviously you've got a full report covering all issues. You've also got some internal consultee comments on your update sheets. One on air quality from regulatory services, and the other from the contaminated land team, who are recommending a 3-stage condition of a desk study, and if necessary, intrusive investigation, and if necessary, mitigation. But I'm afraid I've got to question whether such a condition is fit for purpose in light of the progress that we can see in those images of the drum on the site. I mean, there is a failure of the applicant to follow procedures that has created this risk. During the life of the application, a contaminated land interpretive report was made available. It has been compiled by Ramboll UK Limited. They are part of a leading global engineering, design and consultancy company that we can place some reliance on the information that's provided in that sort of 329 page report. Contaminated Land Team raised concern that this report is not best practice, but they do comment, having looked at our records, it's likely that the survey will have confirmed to be appropriate, and this presupposes that those first steps, the desk study, was appropriate to find the potential contamination. It goes on to say collection of samples, so the intrusive investigation by Ridge, and then the subsequent interpretation of that data by Ramboll both appear of high quality. Ramboll's report includes mitigation, gas protection mitigation, and we are talking about a very large vented commercial building rather than, more sensitive residential end user here. So the level of risk would appear likely to be low, but kind of what are the choices? If you found that a refusal was proportionate and the risk too high, you could refuse the application, but this doesn't seem to fit with the advice that we've got from the Contaminated Land team. You could delay the application for more information if you couldn't be sure on the scale of that risk, but this is sort of to go back to sort of stage one, doing a desk study, when obviously sampling's already been done on the site and mitigation has been offered by to be done by the developers. So the third option is simply to require those gas mitigation measures are included and that there is post-construction verification. Now, forgive me for going into a little bit of detail there. The report suggests I'm going to offer you up a condition on this, but what I would be asking, given that the level of risk appears low, I believe it should just be a condition in relation to the gas mitigation measures and seek delegated authority to the Assistant Director of Planning and Economic Growth to resolve the wording of this planning condition with my colleagues in the Contaminated Land team. So if I basically now can just take you to the last paragraph, conclusion, on page 11. Seems to be the only paragraph with a paragraph number. So it's 5.35. Although proposal C presents design limitations and does not create a complete picture of sustainability by failing to demonstrate how it complies with relevant planning policies, these disappointing aspects of the development are still considered to be outweighed by the economic significance and statutory necessity for the port to have this inspection infrastructure in place by the beginning of the year. So, I say the recommendation, subject to delegated powers to Ian Maguire on the wording of a condition, conditional permission. Thank you, Chair.
So that'd be a fourth condition on the papers. We've got three there right now.
There are.
Yeah.
So under that heading, site contamination remediation, conditions are updated at the meeting. I can't offer you that wording, but I'm offering what I think is the most appropriate solution for it, delegated to Ian Maguire.
But you suggested a wording around a delegating authority to the Director of Planning, Economic and Regeneration to resolve the wording with the Planning and Contaminated Land team. So is that a condition or is it a recommendation or an information as we seem to like nowadays?
So the recommendation is conditional permission, subject to that delegated authority to the Assistant Director.
Very good. Okay. Right then, Mr. Bevan, over to you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Councillors. My name is Jim Bevan from Savills and I'm the planning agent acting on behalf of the applicant, Portsmouth International Port. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. As set out by the case officer, the application seeks retrospective planning consent for the construction of a new border control post on land owned and controlled by Portsmouth International Port. As you're all no doubt aware, as of the 1st of January 2021, the UK became a third-party country for trading with the EU and is now subject to new regulations when exporting and importing products into and out of the country. To ensure compliance with the government's new border operating model, the port now requires additional infrastructure facilities, such as this border control post, to enable new statutory customs and sanitary checks to be carried out. The operating model, which was only released to ports and airports by the government last July, requires that ports must have the new infrastructure in place by July 2022, extended twice from target dates of July 2021 and January 2021. These tight timescales have unfortunately necessitated this consent being sought retrospectively, which is regrettable but ultimately unavoidable in this case in order that the port is able to meet its statutory obligations. Whilst I hope the rationale for the proposed development and the necessity to secure a swift planning consent is clear, what I want to reinforce in this application is that the proposals are consistent with both local and national policy. The site comprises a parcel of industrial land as part of the wider Portsmouth International Port. The site is protected under policy PCS 11 for uses directly related to the operational requirements of the port. The proposed use as a border control post is therefore wholly consistent with the aims and objectives of policy. Policy PCS 23 and the MPPF require all new development to be well designed and, amongst other things, appropriate in scale, layout and appearance. The proposed appearance of the control post is uncomplicated and deliberately simple. The control post will serve a very particular purpose and has been designed to fulfil that role within the port. When viewed against the backdrop of the wider port area, the building will sit comfortably in its surroundings. The case officer has rightly acknowledged in his report the LPA's obligation to protect and enhance heritage assets. The site is not located within a conservation area and contains no above-ground heritage assets. However, as identified, there are a number of heritage assets within the vicinity. Given the existing vegetation to the east of the site, the distance between the site and the assets, and the intervening A3, there will be no significant intervisibility between the site and the assets, and therefore no effect upon their setting or significance. The border control post will not generate any additional transport movements to and from the port, albeit some rerouting of existing freight on arrival will now be required. As detailed in the planning submission, the redistributed freight movements on the local highway network will occur generally outside of typical peak periods, whilst beyond the Rudmore roundabout there will be no change to existing traffic flows. This is acknowledged by the LPA's highways engineer. The port are acutely aware of their obligation under the MPPF to incorporate opportunities for biodiversity enhancement into new development. As discussed with the case officer, the municipal nature of the proposed building and its compound makes soft landscape interventions unfeasible. However, the port have agreed to the principle of providing bird and bat boxes around the site and on key elevations, which, given the existing negligible biodiversity value of the site, should deliver a marked enhancement over existing. Should you be minded to grant consent, a condition will be attached requiring the submission of a scheme for biodiversity enhancements, which will be agreed with the council's ecologist prior to the development being first brought into use. Portsmouth Port are committed to delivering sustainable solutions wherever possible as part of its ambition to become carbon neutral. The regulatory and budgetary constraints placed on this particular proposal have unfortunately precluded the full suite of green interventions being implemented. However, the building is being constructed to allow the future installation of solar panels post-construction. The Council's statutory consultees have all now assessed the proposals and have requested the addition of appropriately worded conditions. Should you be minded to vote in favour of the application, we accept these conditions. Subject to the inclusion of the conditions, there are no outstanding technical objections to the scheme in front of you. Portsmouth International Port is considered to be the United Kingdom's best connected port, uniquely positioned with direct motorway access so goods can flow easily to their destination. Coupled with its proximity to main shipping routes, it is also one of the most suitably placed ports to support efficient trade for British farming, food and imports. Notwithstanding the above, DEFRA have confirmed that if the required border control post infrastructure is not in place, imported products of animal origin for the EU will not be allowed entry into the UK via Portsmouth. Should this occur, there will be significant detrimental consequences to the wider economy and to the port itself. Based on an economic impact assessment undertaken by Oxford Economics, without this border control post and the ability to meet the government's new border operating model, the port's contribution to UK GDP could reduce by 50 million, together with 700 job losses, many of which would be seen within the Hampshire area. Voting in favour of the application in front of you will allow the port to positively respond to the regulatory and financial challenges of the UK's exit from the EU, increase its resilience and maintain its position as a regional employer. I would kindly ask that the committee follow the officer's recommendation in voting to approve this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that information and for describing what has happened. Members, any questions? Good. So before we go to debate, I'm going to move the officer's report. Sorry, Councillor Stagg.
Thank you. Under the Highways Engineer's report, it says the arrangement of this junction should be revised to accommodate each movement without requiring vehicles to U-turn at the roundabout to access the BCP. Has any solution to that been made?
Alan?
That comment is really that in an ideal world, it would be remodelled, but it isn't practical or feasible at this time.
So I know not at this time.
Yeah. Yes.
So maybe come back and look at it via a different route, Councillor Stagg. Carry on.
Yeah, can I ask one other question about, mention about biodiversity? I appreciate that this is an industrial building, but it's not particularly attractive, as most industrial buildings aren't. But as you're coming down, it's the entrance into the city. Is there any way, there's no way to plant trees presumably, but is there any way of having green walls? Because that's not going to take up a lot of space. Because it's an area where there's a lot of air pollution, and even if you have just ivy or something like that growing up walls, that actually catches the particulates, which are one of the worst offenders for respiratory problems.
It's a really good idea. Alan?
There isn't any proposal for any soft landscape, and I mean, at 3/4 of a hectare, it isn't very big for 3,500, or just over 3,500 square metres of building and manoeuvring space for HGVs. I guess the part of the reason why the sustainability credentials can't be demonstrated in that building is because of the limited budget. So the building is going to look like this, which is a pretty sort of simple dark grey clad box.
But we need to be making taking every opportunity to green up places. And I think, small though it may be, as a well-known supermarket, and there are others that says every little helps.
Really good point. And at this point, Mr. Banting, Mr. Bevan has indicated, and I think it's worthwhile letting him say that they'll make every effort to do exactly what you want, Councillor Stagg.
Every effort doesn't convince me. If they say yes, they will do it, I'd be very happy.
Mr. Bevan.
Well, I certainly can't say for certain that they will do it, because I can't speak for them in terms of their budgetary constraints. But there is a planning condition requiring that a suite of biodiversity enhancement is agreed with the council. So if that is something that the council require, then it can be provided through that condition. But I can't promise anything.
I would like to see that happen, Councillor Hunt.
Okay, Mr. Banting, you've made that aware, so we'll have a good look at that, and I'm sure between us all we can make sure something like that happens. Okay. So I'm going to move after that. Thank you very much. That was very helpful and very worthwhile. I'm going to move the officers' report, including the delegation that Mr. Banting talked about earlier on, which was to the Director of Planning and Economic Regeneration to agree the wording with the contaminated land team and the conditions and the matter we've just talked about. Okay, members, open to debate. Over to you guys. Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, I agree with you. I mean, this should get planning permission. It's clearly, this is a piece of essential infrastructure. There are very few places where it can go. There are constraints about the amount of space required to allow it to operate, and so while in some ways it's not ideal as a piece of design, it is what it is, and I think we have to approve it. I do want to make a quick comment. I mean, because it's in such a prominent location, this is separate from planning, but just as a comment to the administration, and it would be nice if possible if it ended up being something other than just painted black all the way around. I mean, the wall facing the M275 is a gateway location, and if at any point it became possible to put something on there to create a sense of place, welcome to Portsmouth Port, welcome to Portsmouth, something like that, I think that will be a very nice thing. Thank you.
Yep, I'm glad to take that back to the leadership of the council and see what we can do about that, Councillor Stagg.
Thank you. Yes, I totally agree with what Councillor Stubbs has said. I think that the port needs this if it's going to carry on with the success that it's already had. So I think it's important that we do agree.
Anybody else like to speak? No, as you say, Councillor Ashmore.
I was about to say, while obviously I welcome the biodiversity enhancements and the strategies being done, that's music to my ears. I was just wondering if there's something in addition it could say by a certain date, just to, otherwise it could look as though at some point in the future something will be agreed with the council, but it doesn't set a time on it. I think people would like to see the urgency of putting something on there that it gets us all working as councillors and officers together to come up with something. And the other thing was, of course, obviously it's a statutory duty. We've got to look at the port and what it is, and I think, imperfect though it is, I think obviously it's basically right next to where the HGVs have to come off. Obviously looking at extra traffic and the air quality issues on that, but if it's literally across the road, I think that's better than traipsing a load of HGVs around the whole city. So, looking at it like that, good thing.
Okay then, well that's all been noted. Is there a date that we could put in, Mr. Banting, do you reckon, to say, welcome to Portsmouth and the greenery and so on? These are all really necessary, and the councillors speak to people every day, and people want us to ensure that the greening of Portsmouth and the place that it is be obvious.
With regards to the biodiversity enhancements, it is a requirement for them to be carried out before the building's first brought into use. So that's the time trigger included in the condition. With regards to the Welcome to Portsmouth, I think what I would mention is that there is a related advertisement application on that elevation that faces onto Mile End Road that says Portsmouth International Port. It isn't welcome to. That may be a different decision about whether any other display should go on that building. But there is, some information that in terms of an advertisement that will be on that east elevation to the Mile End Road, and it is quite a big sign.
And that's to come later?
That was going to be dealt with under delegated powers.
Within this report, or?
No, it's a separate advertisement application.
Okay, well if members want that to come to the committee, then they'll have to write in and say you'd like it to come to the committee, and we'll see what it's all about then. Members, having concluded that debate, do you want to move to the vote? All those in favour of the report as described, please show.
Hold on, no one seconded your proposal yet, Chair.
Yeah, I've got a habit of this. It's authoritarian stuff. Councillor Stagg, thank you very much, has seconded it. Can we move to the vote, please? All those in favour? That's unanimous. Much obliged to you. Thank you. Swiftly on to number 2 then. Mr. Bevan, you're taking your leave, I think. Will you pass those comments back to the Port Administration? Okay, much obliged to you, thank you. So on to Victoria Park, which is number 2 on page 14 or page 40 in your packs. And it's Ed doing it, and we've got Adrian Rosier to talk to us subsequently.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So this is application reference 21-01136 FUL at Victoria Park, Anglesey Road, Portsmouth. Construction of a single-storey community building falling within use class F1 and alterations to existing boiler house with associated landscaping works following demolition of the existing greenhouses and installation of an entrance arch to the northwest entrance. As shown on screen in front of you, the aerial view with the red X's marks the requisite parts of the park that this application relates to. As I'm sure you all know, the park is listed Grade 2, Historic Park and Garden. The Guildhall and Victoria Park Conservation Area contains a number of designated monuments and memorials, and the application relates to the existing maintenance to the existing compound and the northwest entrance. These are internal images of the site. So you have the existing boiler house with an asbestos tiled roof, and the former dilapidated glasshouse greenhouses on site that are to be demolished as part of this proposal. There is also a large black poplar tree which will be protected by tree protection measures during construction works if permission is granted. The site isn't publicly accessible currently and hidden by existing landscaping. So just bear with me a second. Pardon. Trying to read my further notes on this. Bear with me a second. Right. Yes, so not publicly accessible and hidden by existing landscaping. This slide shows some further photographs of the maintenance compound within the park, including the aviary, which is in the top left picture. You'll have to forgive me, I'm fairly new to Portsmouth, so I haven't actually had a chance to walk around this lovely park at the moment, and this application is being dealt with by a colleague of mine. So these are some images of the proposed development. The first part of the proposal is the construction of a single-storey building and canopy following the demolition of the existing greenhouses within the maintenance compound. This would provide an indoor space for education and exhibition use, office and meeting spaces, and 2 public toilets. The building would be sited just to the north of the existing glasshouses, bringing it closer to the main footpath through the park, but within the footprint of the greenhouse that was removed from the park, I'm told, in about 1998. The existing maintenance compound around the new building would be opened up to the public by the removal of sections of the existing high hedge and fencing and re-landscaped to form the new setting to the hub building. Moving on, this shows the footprint of the building and the indication of landscaping proposed. The building is approximately 15 metres by 7.5 metres. An open oak framed canopy would continue the building form to the southeast, covering a further area of 10.5 by 7.5 metres. Finished with a mono-pitched roof, 4.5 metres high at its highest point and 3.5 metres at the lowest eaves point. Externally, the building would be finished predominantly with arrowhead clay tiles with smaller sections of brickwork to the northwest elevation. The southern section of the building would incorporate large folding windows and doors within powder-coated metal frames, and with smaller windows and doors to the northwest elevation. A green roof would also incorporate solar voltaic panels. And this slide shows the northwest and southeast elevations and also shows the alterations to the boiler house, which include raising the eaves. And I'm told the boiler house is to house air source heat pumps for heating. These are some context views of the landscaping. The relatively restrained footprint, height, sympathetic materials give the proposed design a polite and sympathetic character within its sensitive context. Although more contemporary in appearance and sited with a landscape context that seeks to visually open up the interior of the park to make it more accessible and inviting, it is considered that the building would sit comfortably within its setting, harmonising sympathetically within views across and through the surrounding historic park. And this slide shows the arrowhead tiles that I described earlier, handmade arrowhead clay tiles, and there are some examples of this within the lodge within the park. A condition is proposed seeking approval of materials. This shows the indicative landscaping plan, and a plan, again, a condition is proposed seeking the approval of detailed design on that. It is accepted that the proposal would involve the loss of established and not insignificant areas of mature landscaping that contribute positively to the character of the park and provide natural screening of the built structures within the maintenance compound. And whilst this is unfortunate, it is considered that opportunities exist for replacement planting which could provide a visually appropriate setting to and assist the hub building settle into its surroundings. The second part of the proposal is to create a new entrance feature to the northeast entrance onto Anglesey Road and Queen Street. This would comprise brick piers and a decorative metal archway as shown on screen in front of you. The entrance is of an appropriate and sympathetic design and would improve legibility of the park. The lower image there shows a visual impression of what the new archway would look like on new piers. A planning condition again is recommended to seeking the finer details of that proposal. Overall, it is considered that the proposed development would preserve the special architectural and historic interests of the park and the character and appearance of the conservation area. The introduction of a community hub, a community building at the heart of the park within a new open landscape setting is also regarded as a positive addition to both the park and the communities that use it. And the officer recommendation is therefore conditional permission. Thank you, Chair.
So, Mr. Rosier, if you'd like to go next, then we'll go over to Ms. Topham and Mr. Harris. Is that right? Yeah.
Should do Mr. Harris first.
Any particular reason?
It then gives the applicant opportunity to come back on what they've said.
What about the other way around? All right. Okay. Mr. Harris, over to you, sir.
That's fine, thank you, Chair. So good morning, my name is Mark Harris from Freeths. I'm here this morning to represent the University of Portsmouth, and I'm joined to my left by Bernie Topham, the University's COO and Deputy Vice-Chancellor. We have made a written representation to the application dated the 14th of October, which I've seen is in the update sheet before you. You'll be aware the University owns the former Victoria Bath site in the southwestern corner of Victoria Park. And I wish to make it very clear from the outset that the University supports, in principle, any improvements to the park. As an important stakeholder, the University recognises the importance and value of the park as an urban park, an open amenity space for those living, working and studying in the area, so the proposed improvements can only be beneficial. The planned new community building and events area will also enhance its role in promoting health and well-being. The University's detailed position is influenced by its position of its land holding. The University has concerns about this scheme's relationship with their land and how it is presented in the application. Specifically, the proposal to provide events for car parking linked with the events area, which is marked as number 8 on the master plan, adjacent to the pedestrian access from the park, is of particular concern as it conflicts with the University's permitted and planned use of their land. You'll be aware the University's site benefits from an extant planning permission for a 33-storey mixed-use building for the University known as the Blade, and this is capable of completion. Pedestrian access to this building will be gained from the park, and it will be serviced from existing lay-by and Anglesey Road. And there are works to the perimeter of the park and footpath, including a new plaza area, which is submitted as part of the papers in the update sheet. You'll also be aware that the University's current application for a new 12-storey teaching and learning building, known as the Victoria Park Building. And this is an improved scheme for the site and has been designed to take pedestrian access from the park and utilise the Anglesey Road frontage together with retention of the current boundary treatment and access service arrangements. In the architect's brief has been specified that the building must be of high quality and designed to integrate with the park. Now, the University is disappointed to note that this application does not refer to its schemes and fails to take into account their physical relationship with the park in the proposed master plan. There is also no consideration of the Blade as a permitted scheme in the officer's report. As a directly adjoining site that has a clear physical relationship with the park, it's fundamental that this proposal reflects the Blade scheme or any subsequent approval for the improved scheme. Now, this can be addressed without delaying this application or affecting the funding process. And we recommend the Park Master Plan is revised to make clear its physical relationship with the Blade and how the park is intended to be used following completion of the improvements. This will ensure that the implementation of the scheme's pedestrian and vehicular access, servicing, mitigation, landscaping and pedestrian movement is not prejudiced by the proposed improvements and use of the park. And should the Victoria Park building scheme be approved, then we'd expect the scheme to be further revised accordingly. This, in our view, can be achieved through an appropriately worded pre-commencement condition. This can require the submission of details of the master plan works and operational details such as access and event parking in the southwestern corner of the site to demonstrate how an acceptable relationship with the works can be achieved. We can work separately with Mr. Rosier and his colleagues in terms of achieving that. Now, I note in the update sheet there is an officer's response which sets out that this condition has not been accepted by your case officer, as it's not considered to be a significant effect or to compromise development. I'd repeat what I've said earlier. For the proper planning of the park, I do continue to recommend the pre-commencement condition, as we do not believe that the exact relationship of the master plan, the intensification of the southwest corner in terms of the use for parking to support events, and the university's scheme has been properly assessed and documented. Whilst ongoing dialogue will be maintained, the condition offers both an appropriate mechanism for both the city and the university to continue that relationship and that dialogue and secure a beneficial improvement for both parties. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'll give you 6 minutes, Mr. Topham. I beg your pardon? Sorry, say it again.
So I'm happy not to say anything further. I think my the agent is...
Okay then, Mr. Rosier.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to offer an overview of the project and the work that has informed the park proposals. The Reviving Victoria Park project is a unique opportunity to reinstate the park as the People's Park, Portsmouth's first ever public park and the green heart of our city. Based on extensive local consultation and support, the aim of this project is to restore, improve and celebrate the park's heritage. The project involves a significant capital investment, elements of which are included within today's planning application, including the new community hub with an outdoor covered space and publicly accessible toilets, and further investment which sits outside the application that includes restoration works to the aviary, heritage assets, park infrastructure and new heritage interpretation and play facilities. Alongside this work, a 4-year programme of community investment will run, including inclusive activities, heritage and community events, personal and professional development opportunities and job creation. In 2019, the National Lottery Heritage Fund awarded the City Council an initial grant to test the feasibility of our plans. Since spring 2020, the project team has worked with the local community, our neighbours and local community groups to understand their needs and barriers to using the space. We've brought together a hugely diverse and truly representative group of stakeholders who have helped shape and develop the proposals through extensive consultation and co-design facilitated by the project team and consultants. The aims of the project are many and varied. These include having a wide range of people involved in and learning about heritage, improving the condition and explanation of our heritage assets, improving the local area and economy, and supporting people to develop new skills and have greater well-being. Using heritage as a starting point, we are seeking to address the needs of local communities, particularly around health, well-being, employment, skills and training. There will be a focus on aspiration and trying out activities that can lead to further opportunities via project partners. The hub will house a wide range of initiatives, including social integration groups, the schools outreach programme, and supportive volunteering opportunities expanding existing social care projects. The hub design is a direct result of our work with these audiences, who explained they needed somewhere safe, neutral, and within an engaging setting. The external design is a direct result of our design focus groups, where we heard that although a modern style was the majority preference, the building should sit well and respond to the landscape and context. This led to the choice of tiles, echoing those on the Lodge Cafe and the colours which are seen throughout the park, in the tunnel entrance, on the aviary and the brick of the boiler house. The large covered external space to the east of the building was added at the request of many park user groups who utilise it as a meeting space but wanted all-weather spaces. The existing boiler house is being adapted to house new services such as the air source heat pump, having heard repeatedly that a sustainable and environmentally friendly building was important to our residents. The maintenance yard will be opened up to the public and will enable the Friends Group to work alongside local veterans to build a community garden, a request that came from so many residents and user groups that, although not in our original plans, could not be ignored. As I've said, this is a unique opportunity. If successful with grant award, the project will attract almost £3 million of funding for Victoria Park and its users. This includes a £2.2 million grant from the lottery, over £350,000 pledged from Portsmouth City Council, including seal contributions, £97,000 in further grant funding, and just under £240,000 of projected volunteer hours. Without the funding, the loss to the park and community will be significant. The park infrastructure, historic landscape and heritage assets will continue to slowly fall into disrepair. We will be unable to help protect the park against some of the future usage or the continued effects of climate change. We also risk losing the huge amount of backing and excitement among local communities, the patronage of 30 local community organisations who are already signed up to co-deliver elements of the project, and the opportunity for greater social cohesion by users of the park. The project team submitted the final site plans, supporting documents and funding requests to the lottery in August this year and are awaiting a decision in December. Should the project be successful in securing both funding and the planning consent it is also reliant on, work will recommence in January and the project will run to early 2026. I did want to take this opportunity just to address one of the points raised in the deputation. The relationship between the two sites is of course an important and sensitive one to consider, but is not part of this application site or the proposals for which we are seeking consent, and therefore do not feel that the request for an additional pre-commencement condition is appropriate. Plans for the adjacent land have deliberately been kept minimal, indicated by suitable soft landscaping, so this can easily be amended as designs develop and our master plan design finalised. The relationship between the two sites is certainly a consideration for the planning application relating to the adjacent development site, and we will of course be available to engage in further discussion, facilitated by the respective design teams to ensure this achieves a workable outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rosier. I mean, what's the distance? Who's doing this one again? It was Ed. What's the distance between this site and the university site? I think it's about 80 metres, isn't it? All right.
Chair, can I also just clarify that the master plan that Adrian Rosier has referred to and other elements to do with the improvements to the park sit outside this application, and that and therefore to tie it into this would be, officers would consider to be inappropriate and would fail the relevant necessary conditions.
It'd be unreasonable, obviously. Members, that was my question. Any other questions, members, to the officers? I've got Councillor Stubbs and then Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to clarify firstly about the funding for this, and I do recognise that in planning policy today, financial and economic considerations are relevant, which is, I mean, conscious of the university's comments, I mean, is it even, how long could we delay this if we wanted to? I'm not suggesting that we do, it's a question. When have we got to make a commitment on this? How long have we got?
Could anybody give Councillor Stubbs a reply on that one? And I suspect if you're stuck, Ed, that Adrian Rosier might be able to help you. Adrian, over to you.
So the application's in for decision, and that decision would be made towards the end of November, early December. And if we were successful, it would be reliant on having planning consent for the items that we've requested.
So it's urgent. Any more? Councillor Hooper, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. Probably Adrian's the best person to answer my question. Thank you to Adrian and his team. I appreciate what this is going to bring to the community in sense of a focus on heritage, encouraging aspiration, and this wonderful veteran community garden. But I'm just interested, you talked about the modern style preference of buildings. Can I ask a little more, please, about the consultation that decided this was the best style to pursue? What shape did this consultation take? Who was involved? And how many people's views were taken into consideration?
Okay, so the consultation was centred around working around COVID precautions at the time. So a lot was done over social media, over Teams and that type of call. It was carried out. We have a community engagement officer as part of the team, and that person has been out working with a lot of the residents and the local communities, and also supported by consultants who've led on these consultation and community aspects. There's a series of focus groups, and also meeting in the park, and in total there were over 1,500 responses to one of the consultations on the park, which for a council project is a significant amount of responses. The design team have helped assist some of those consultations in terms of what people wanted, what they preferred, so they would have looked at different types of style that would have been suitable for the park, and they've taken their steer from those focus groups, and that's really what's led to the final design of the building.
Okay, could you just remind the committee the style of the building, because you mentioned about the arrowhead tiles and so on. I wonder if members could just be reminded, Ed, because it's really all come from the planning officer, the style of the building and how they look. Yes, could you just remind the committee, please, about the style of the building and how they look? Because we had these arrowhead. I'm sorry, because I know Ezzy was going to do this one. If you're stumped.
No, I've got the slide.
All right. Okay, you're putting it up on the screen.
If we go back to slide.
Do you want to pop your microphone on?
Contemporary design building, in my view, with a mono-pitch roof. The vertical walls here, as shown on the upper and lower slide, are with this handmade tile cladding. You can also see on the top picture here an element of the green roof that would also house photovoltaic panels. Yes, so yeah, that's the design of the building.
Okay, so we've heard about the consultation, how it's reached in with members of the public, park users, 30 groups were mentioned. So bearing in mind the coronavirus problems, quite an extensive and successful consultation. Members, I'm going to, if there are any more questions, beg your pardon. Okay, well thank you all very much for coming. I'm going to move the officer's report. I note that this application is the site is 80 metres from the university building, and they can talk to our various teams subsequent to this meeting. It is an urgent matter upon which a lot of money is decided to do the things that people tell us that they want. And I'm sure Councillor Atwell is going to second this in a moment. And this involves public loos, which people have been telling us they want they want. So these are new and modern public facilities, community facilities. I mean, I suppose I could say, what is there not to like about this? It's a big commitment to the park, and we see other things happening there, which has been on the cards for some time. It is clear that a huge amount of hard work has been done by the parks team and the design teams. We see that we've got, as ever, with these council applications, the solar panels on the roof, a green roof. I mean, I think by the lack of, not the lack of questions, but that there aren't so many questions, that, all the boxes are being ticked. It's a massive facility for local users of the park, and to see the gateway enhancement, that too is important. And I should think everybody should be thrilled and delighted with what the City Council is doing in this particular application and this park. Councillor Atwell. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Great pleasure to second the recommendation. Just as an aside, thank you to the Victoria Park team, project team, for all their hard work. Good luck with the application in the coming weeks. It's a terrific addition, I think, to the park, but more importantly to the local community. So best wishes with the application, and Chair, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Councillor Stubbs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good-looking scheme. All looks fantastic, and I accept the argument about how the university's objections relate to related but different matter, and that time is pressing. And the comment I wanted to make isn't within the scope of planning as such, but I think it's just something I'd like to say to the administration, which is one of the things which I regret. I had control of planning policy for a while, some years ago, is I didn't put through a policy on the detailing of paving and such like, so that when we have planning applications coming in, as have happened on the former Chorlton House, for an example, you end up with developers coming forward for paving and landscaping schemes that are not consistent with each other. I am conscious that straight outside of this park you have land which, I guess we don't know now because the economy and COVID, but was at any rate going to be developed for a hotel and residential building straight outside, and I think that it would be a good idea to put in place some early policies which can be shared with developers so that we can have a consistency amongst stonage and railings and so on, because if it all hangs together, the effect is much greater than the sum of its parts.
Completely agree with you. Thank you for that. Do you reckon you could drop me a few lines like that by email, and I'll make sure it goes to the right place? Don't use my councillor email, Yeah, and I'll make sure it goes to the right place. It's really good that, we tried to do that with the entrance to the M275. You come down with that landscaping, and the idea was to progress that all the way down towards the seafront. So we'll probably see that happening a bit more. I've tried to do it in my front garden as well. Councillor Smith.
It was just follow on really from Councillor Stubbs. Really, that's exactly what I was thinking. They should really, the sites should sit well together, and if they can be blended with the sort of streetscape and things, because you can see in the university proposal what they're proposing in terms of furniture, things. But getting the look and feel right, getting the signature across the two sites would be really good if we could achieve that. I know it's tricky.
Good use of the word signature, and bear in mind we've opened up towards Moore Memorial the Victoria Park, which was perhaps not looked after well enough for a long time, is now getting the investment and the attention that it richly deserves. Councillor Fielding.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of add my congratulations to the consultation that was involved as part of this process. I think the design work specifically is modern whilst sympathetic to the existing park, and it's great to see, as we've already highlighted, green roof photovoltaic panels being put in there, so it's very much a sustainable design. So yeah, very, very pleased with this.
Yeah, thank you all very much. Mr. Rosier, I'm sure you'll be talking to the university subsequently. Thank you, Mrs. Topham, and I'm sure they understand why we're putting it through this morning. They've made their point, and I'm sure you'll all be talking together. But would you also be kind enough to pass on from this committee, on behalf of us all, the congratulations that have been mentioned for a really good consultation, and to the design team too, and everybody else involved, and we hope that that excitement that's been created with amongst all the community groups is further enhanced by the approval today. Okay? All right.
Chair, we haven't had a vote yet.
Yeah.
We've
I
had
get that.
a proposal in a second.
I'm going to come to it now.
It's not been approved yet.
So I have proposed it. Councillor Atwell has seconded it. Members, all those in approval, please raise your hand. So that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time this morning. So that quickly brings us to item number 3, which is the alterations, cleaning and repairs of HMS Shah Memorial Monument to Admiral Napier. And I've asked the officers in the pre-agenda to explain to us why the black plaques are coming off. And I think Mr. Rosier might be able to talk about that, but someone told me during the pre-agenda why that was happening. So over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Chair. Members, application reference 21-01137 LBC at Victoria Park again. Alterations, cleaning and repairs of the HMS Shah Memorial, the monument to Admiral Napier and the Centenary Fountain. Again, as shown by the 3 red X's on the aerial photograph in front of you. This is a listed building consent for alterations, cleaning and repairs as described. The first element being the Centenary Fountain. This will involve the restoration and enhancement of the upper jet to the fountain. As you will see, the left-hand photograph on the lower tier there shows a rather ugly sort of spray arrangement. That was apparently to restrict the spray to prevent the possible spread of Legionella. I'm advised that the water has been sufficient cleanliness these days to eliminate that risk. Hence the proposal to put back a much more ornate spray arrangement as befits the Victoria the fountain. The consent is also sought for specialist steam cleaning and jet washing where required, repainting of the cast iron work and the 4 swans and metal railings. Moving on to the monument to Admiral Napier. Sorry, I think this is actually the HMS Shah Memorial, I think. So this will involve the removal of the 4 black marble plaques and specialist steam cleaning. The plaques were put in place at some point in the past. I'm afraid I don't have the date to hand, because a view was taken that the original engraving on the limestone was getting so eroded and difficult to read that that these plaques were put up just to sort of show whose names were engraved on the monument at the time. So these plaques, which are somewhat out of keeping with the original monument, are to be removed by specialist operatives using hand tools and so on, and will be under a scheme for replacing the engraving will be determined in due course. You will note from the report that this will be subject to a condition requiring method statements to be submitted and detail to be determined in due course. the HMS Shah Memorial I think, so this is now, the slide is incorrectly labelled, apologies for that. This is the monument to Admiral Napier, and this is to be treated to specialist lime mortar repointing, repairs to the base plinth, and specialist steam cleaning. The existing incorrectly installed cementitious pointing would be removed to a depth of 20 millimetres to ensure that no damage occurs to the surrounding masonry. And replacement mortar will be selected in consultation with the Lime Centre in Winchester, which is a specialist in that field, and the LPA will be consulted to ensure the best colour and texture match. The range of works to these memorials are considered appropriate and necessary to help secure the sympathetic restoration and long-term future of the assets, and therefore conditional listed building consent is recommended. Thank you.
Mr. Rosier.
Thank you, Chair. I note I'm noted on this item as well. I've not really got anything further to the overview already offered. And in respect to these, they're obviously very specialist works that we've engaged the Monuments and Memorials Officer, planning officers, conservation officers and specialists to inform these proposals, and I think the specific works and the detailed works best described in the heritage statements within the application.
Okay, any questions, members? There are no questions. Thank you all very much indeed again. And I'm going to move the officer's report with the conditions therein. This is altogether, so long as it all comes off, and it looks like it's going to, a £3 million renaissance of this park, putting it back to perhaps it's, restoring it a lot and introducing elements which are contemporary and modern, but respecting the park itself in order to improve community facilities and so on. So enormously grateful again for the work and for everybody working on this. Did anybody want to add anything, Councillor Atwell?
As the portfolio holder for monuments and memorials, I'd like to echo your comments and to second your proposal.
Comments, members? Okay. So there we are. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. We're going to go to the vote now. So all those in favour of the recommendations and the conditions, please show. Thank you very much. So that is approved. We look forward to seeing all this happening in the park, Mr. Rosier. Thank you very much indeed for your time and your help today. Moving on to Middle Street now. Gents, who's doing this one? Simon. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Edward. This is an application at Middle Street, close by here in this, to the south of the city centre. Before I dive in with all the details and taking you through the site and the proposals, we have deputations from Mr. Tarrant, who's introduced himself earlier, on behalf of Sunrise Stained Glass, who are in premises within the application site, and Mr. Hannah for the applicant. Also, you will have noticed, hopefully in the SMAT, the Supplementary Matters Report, some updates there that I will come back to at the end. If I forget, please do remind me. And then also, before I come into the details of the application, members will have seen from the report in front of you, the published report, the application has already been appealed against non-determination. The application is 3 years old, so the applicant has made that appeal. So what is happening today is that we're asking for your decision, what your decision would have been if you still had the powers to determine the application. But because it's been appealed, it will actually be the Planning Inspectorate who will make that decision, but clearly your recommendation to the Planning Inspectorate is key for establishing the formal position of the local planning authority. So the application is an outline application with scale and access to be determined. That means the reserved matters are layout, appearance and landscaping.
This will be a building of 6 to 11 stories high, which will provide 163 flats and 3 commercial units of a wide range of possible uses: retail, financial professional, cafe, restaurant, offices, and or non-residential, and has a basement car park proposed. Next slide, please. Just to locate, the one before, please, Ed. Just to locate everyone, so it's just south of the city centre here, so that is the east-west Sir Winston Avenue, Sir Winston Churchill Avenue there. On the northern side, the larger building is the Law Courts, and there is a well-used pedestrian crossing across the avenue that takes you to the Eldon building, which is there on the right with that sort of quadrangle. That's the University of Portsmouth building of 3 to 5 stories with different departments in it. Moving clockwise around the site you can see red edged in the centre there on Middle Street. That is Middle Street running north-south on the eastern side of the red edge site. Back to the Eldon building, it's car park there to the south. And then further to the south we have the Raven public house on the south-east corner opposite the site. Then moving to the south and west of the site we have post-war what was local authority housing, mostly still is, 4-storey buildings containing maisonettes you can see snaking around to the southwest, and then immediately to the west, the left of the application site, is the 18-storey Leamington house. You can probably see outside the window here. That's been vacant for over 3 or 4 years now, and will be demolished in the coming months, with the redevelopment of that wider area earmarked. To the north of Leamington House and fronting onto Winston Churchill Boulevard is the Ibis Hotel there, that L-shaped building. And then to the immediate north of the Red Edge site we have an 8-storey student accommodation block, and then immediately north of that last building there is, I think, a 12-storey student accommodation block. I'll come to photos in a minute to reiterate these for you. And then at the southern end of the site, edged in blue, you can see, so that's in the applicant's control as well, is the former PDSA building, a Pets Dispensary, a 2-storey brick building. Members may recall we had an application there from the same applicant for a 4-storey student accommodation building some months ago that members refused, principally on the lack of employment or not sufficient employment commercial space provided. And then the last building in that southwest quadrant of the block is a 4-storey existing student accommodation block. Next slide, please. So that is looking across Middle Street, the eastern elevation of Middle Street. So you can see on the right-hand side the 2 larger student accommodation buildings, and then behind them Leamington House, 18 stories. And then the application site sits in the middle there, really. The lower buildings, most of those lower buildings of 2 and 3 stories. There are some vacancies in them. There's a cafe-type use towards the southern end, and sunrise stained glass. Next slide, please. That's to identify the site for you on that elevation. So that's where the 6 to 11-storey buildings of 163 flats would be inserted. Because appearance and layout are reserved matters, this is an indicative elevation, but it is an accurate elevation of the heights you can expect to accommodate those 163 flats and 3 commercial units. So indicatively, the applicant has shown some individual building elements, 5 there of different heights, with the ground floor commercial facing onto Middle Street there. Next slide, please. Photographically, this may help you some more, I hope. That's looking across the Eldon building car park, again looking at the eastern elevation. So just to locate you, the darker building on the left-hand side, the brick building, that's the Pets Dispensary, the PDSA as was. So that's the site of the current appeal against the refused student accommodation of 4-storey. And then to its immediate right is the sunrise stained glass building of 3 stories in white there. That's the southernmost building on the application site, and the rest of the site goes to the north from there. And then to the right of that, the 2-storey grey building is the current cafe use that goes on there, and then the other buildings have a range of different uses and vacancies, 2 and 3 stories. Thank you. Next slide. So this is looking along Middle Street, looking south.
So that is the application site in front of you, really. On the right-hand side, you can make out the foot of one of the university accommodation, student accommodation buildings there. And then the first two-storey building to the left of that sign is the application site running down towards the end. You can just make out the three-storey peaked front gable there of the Sunrise stained glass building. So the site would sit in there, and I'll have a slide later which will show you more or less the same view. Next slide, please, which is almost the same view, but taken a bit closer to Winston Churchill Avenue. It's just to show the scale of the buildings higher up there on the right-hand side. That's the 8-storey student accommodation block. And then on the left, it rises to 5 stories, the Eldon building, 5 tall stories. So it's to show the sort of scale of development and the change in scale between some existing buildings that exists on that street. So the new development would sit in above those 2- and 3-storey buildings, or higher than those 2- or 3-storey buildings, as you can see. We'll see that slide in a minute. Next one, please. Moving around to the rear of the site, if I can call it that, the western side, Earlsdon Street. So there are the 2 student accommodation buildings on the left-hand side, and the application site starts from that white wall facing south, and you can see the lower commercial buildings on the right-hand side, centre and right, that would be demolished and replaced with the 6- to 11-storey flatted building. The architectural window effect treatment on the southern elevation there is purely aesthetic. There aren't real windows there, and it was always anticipated the sites next door could or would come forward in due course, and indeed that is the application today. Next slide, please. This is also Earlsdon Street, slightly further south, looking north, just to show you the residential buildings on the left-hand side, the 4-storey maisonette blocks, and then Leamington House. And then on the right-hand side, in the middle of the site, you've got the commercial buildings that would be taken away. They've got quite a lot of them have rear access and servicing from Earlsdon Street. And there's the 4-storey existing student accommodation building on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. I think probably the last contextual photograph for you. So this is looking from the south, looking up towards the city centre. So again, we can see the edge of that white building, the 8-storey white building, where the development would end at its northern end, and then it would sit behind the 2-storey PDSA building you can see more in the foreground. So it would sit in there of similar sort of height between the 2 taller buildings on the north side that you've seen. There's the Raven pub on the right-hand side, lower in blue on that corner. Thank you. Next slide. So here is the indicative ground floor, because layout is a reserved matter, but this is a good indication of, if allowed at appeal, how the development would be set out, but that will be a reserved matter for a future application. So you can immediately pick out the 3 commercial units fronting Middle Street on the top there, which is the eastern side of the development. And I don't know how easily you can see, but there are some accesses also for the flats on the upper stories. So I think 2 doorways facing Middle Street, a lot of cycle parking and plant and so on fronting there. And then to the rear, indicatively, a number of units are shown facing onto Earlsdon Street, disabled access units and parking that you can see, 8 surface car parking spaces to serve those units indicatively. And then lastly, the basement parking, 46 I think spaces, will be accessed via a car lift rather than a ramp. So on the left-hand side, that left-hand side commercial unit, if you look to its bottom, there are 2 shaded rectangles. Those would be the 2 bays that cars would be driven into and lifted down into the basement. The 3 commercial units have a total of approximately 600 square metres as shown. Next slide, please. This is an indicative layout of the first floor plan as it happens, just to give you an idea of how the development could be laid out to achieve 163 flats. A mixture of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom flats are indicated, all complying with the nationally described space standards. So we've got a good idea of what sort of flats could be accommodated in here at 163 total.
You can see some articulation of the building that you will have noticed also in the first elevation to give an indication of how that building could be laid out. Next paragraph, please. Slide. Thank you. Here's just one of the upper floors to show you that the intended purpose of the roofs is to have some communal shared space for the residents in order to provide precisely that, some outdoor space, some amenity. Next slide, please. This just takes you down to the basement to show those 46 or so parking spaces, 46, yes, and the two bays on the left-hand side that take you up and down in the lift. The basement parking was added during the course of the application to increase the total amount. Next slide, please. So to give you an idea of how the applicant may envisage the scheme if it does come forward, so this is a reserved matter of appearance as well as layout. This is how it could look. You saw in the first stage of the ghost images 5 individual building elements that you can see here with recessed areas to give definition. The student accommodation building that's subject to the appeal already on the left-hand side there isn't shown, and this elevation still shows the PDSA that's 2-storey, you can see. But if we go to the next slide, thank you, that does show the proposed student accommodation. So you've got a choice of both, either should that appeal fail, how it may look, the step up if it is allowed at appeal. So you've got a feel there for the scale, potential architecture, articulation, and the ground floor commercial units there as well with shop fronts or commercial type frontages. Next slide, please. This is showing the rear of the development, so that's Leamington House to the right there, and this is viewed from the Hotel Ibis car park. So the first 2 elements you can see, centre left, the brick, and then the render, that's the existing 8-storey student accommodation. And then the rest of the development you can see is the proposed development in front of you today. And you can just about make out some of the articulation at ground floor level for the individual units on the front there. Next slide, please. This is from the south, looking north, against the Raven Public House is just tucked away to the right. You can see the development sitting in there between the various existing and or proposed buildings. To the left is existing residential accommodation. Next one, please. So I did promise you we'd come back to this view from looking down to the south along Middle Street. There's the Eldon building on the left, the two bays of the student accommodation on the right, and then in between in the middle is the 6 to 11-storey proposal in front of you today. So it's to give you an indication of how that street could appear, or of buildings of that height. If I perhaps take you back to the supplementary matters report, it was just to tidy up 3 matters from the published report: public open space, affordable housing review mechanism, and the Solent protection areas, special protection areas mitigation. So with respect to public house, members may have noticed in the report that matter wasn't resolved, and we were still exploring that, and that will carry on beyond today with whatever your recommendation may be for the inspector. But we did feel that the scheme ought to provide some public open space with 163 flats. The viability is in the council's opinion at 15%, which is the lowest limit, the lower limit of the range normally acceptable. But we did feel the applicant could find within a scheme of this size some public open space provision. So the Park Service has confirmed it believes there's opportunities for some spend in some of the local areas. We will tie that down over the following weeks, whether it be in children's play areas in the area or in Victoria Park or wherever else it may be locally, and that's a matter of negotiation with the applicant and therefore finally for the inspectorate to decide on that matter. But we do have an agreement in principle from the applicant to provide public open space somewhere off-site by way of a financial contribution. The site can't take it on-site because of its restricted size, of course. The second matter, the review mechanism, that just wasn't picked up or agreed prior to publication of the report. But again, affordable housing, the scheme is deemed not quite to be able to afford that, but as all these schemes, as many of you will be familiar with now, especially on a larger scheme that may be a little bit down the track in terms of development, viability will change to some degree, greater or lesser, in due course. So should viability actually improve, the review mechanism will pick that up and provide the amount of affordable housing that is allowed by that improved viability. So the applicant has agreed to that review mechanism, which is standard. And then lastly, we're just tidying up, confirming the special protection areas mitigation for nitrates and recreational bird disturbance, tying that up through the appropriate assessment with the planning inspectorate and the legal agreement. I think those are the main points I wish to make. Thank you, Chairman.
Before you sign off, Simon, I think you'd confirm to members that the viability statement has been independently looked at, also came to the same conclusion.
That's right. We always rely on independent assessment these days. Well, always. So yes, we've had that. It's common that the applicant and the independent consultant appointed by the council won't agree in every area. That's normal. But in the end, we did feel the independent consultant appointed by us did feel there was more viability than the applicant said, but nevertheless it didn't get beyond the lower threshold of 15%.
And everybody can read what the review mechanism seeks to achieve on page 44 on the reports, or page 70, however you see them. Okay, so we've got Mr. and Mrs. Tarrant, and then the agent, Mr. Hanna. Ms. Gill, any particular way round, do you think, to ensure fairness?
Alex Tarrant first. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm a second-generation craftsman, designer and restorer of stained glass windows. Our family business, Sunrise Stained Glass, has been successfully operating from 58 to 60 Middle Street since 1985. We serve the local community, creating and restoring traditionally made windows in homes, churches and historic buildings all over the local area, including both of our cathedrals and this very building, the Guildhall. Our work gains national acclaim, and last year we won our first major international commission for 6 large new windows in a new church in Hong Kong, a project which we are currently working on, which is due for completion next year. We and the team of local people who we employ have worried for years about development on Middle Street affecting us, and we have even looked in the past at alternative locations. But there's a chronic shortage of viable premises for businesses such as ours in Portsmouth, especially in Southsea, as every available site is developed into yet more flats. Nothing we viewed was close to viable. We were advised by Donna Jones and Peter Bolf, who were council leader and city solicitor at the time of asking, that our long lease was secure against redevelopment, and on that basis we took the decision last year to invest in the future of our business and improve our Middle Street premises considerably. If this planning proposal, which includes our site, was to somehow go ahead, it would not only likely destroy our business, but also be highly detrimental to the local environment, infrastructure and community. We have personal experience with these developers. Operating behind shell companies and offshore tax havens, they build incredibly poor quality buildings with no regard for anything other than profit. The student accommodation that they built behind us is shockingly poorly built and already becoming unsightly. When building it, they attempted to maximise their profitability by intentionally and illegally removing our right-of-way and fire escape. Their disregard and greed forced us into a 10-year legal battle, which after much risk to us and detriment to our business was finally resolved in our favour. As for any claims of improving ecology, the first thing they did on acquiring the former PDSA building next door to us at 62 Middle Street was to cut down a beautiful, mature, flowering tree in the car park outside, which is viewable from the whole street. The outside-in food court these developers are now involved with has frequently got overflowing bins and spilling rubbish and broken glass all over the road and pavement, sometimes left for weeks. And we've now had to put mesh over our drains to stop rats entering our premises. Yeah, it's not just for these reasons that this development is unsuitable. Adding yet more population density to this overcrowded part of an overcrowded city with woefully inadequate parking provision and zero affordable home provision is unacceptable. This piles yet more pressure on an overstretched, crumbling infrastructure, which is already resulting in unsafe nitrate levels in rivers, raw sewage being pumped by billions of litres of it directly into the ocean, and one of the highest GP to patient ratios in the country at over 2,500. The developer's excuses for not meeting minimum responsible building requirements are purely profit-driven and totally invalid. The street was full of commercial activity before the developers acquired all the sites and land banked them. In its current state, it has potential as much-needed commercial use. Any new residential development on the street would be welcomed if it was an appropriate size and scale. And on that point, I'd like to make the point that a lot of the images that we've just seen, especially the renders, have been manipulated to make the application not look as high as it really will be. That is very, very tall. Nobody that I've spoken to in the local area, everyone is actually quite shocked at the ball by the height of it. As you move south down Middle Street, you're into exclusively 2 to 3 story, 4 at the most high dwellings, and this is going to 11. They've put things like, you know, fake trees outside the building in the renders, which there's no way to, you know, where those could exist, and they've made them the height of kind of giant Californian redwoods to try and make the buildings look shorter. Let me go on. Now, another point I'd like to make on the parking, they've added some parking, but it's some 40-something spaces and 180 odd flat. The council previously said that they wouldn't grant any residence parking permits to people in those flats, but there's been a recent court case in London. Let me just find the details here. So in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea has determined that preventing occupiers from applying for permits is unlawful restriction of their rights and may not be enforced. So we say, therefore, the shortfall of 186 spaces plus provision for visitors, including carers and medical and social workers, remains the responsibility of the planning authority and developer to resolve. So that's another point which should be beared in mind. So we say basically this proposal meets none of these requirements. I've prepared some documents listing everything with sources, which I have copies for all the councillors if you would like to see them. I also have some photos here I appreciate this is going to be very hard to see, but I'll leave it somewhere where it can be viewed. This is the building that the developers built behind us for student accommodation. It's all covered, the walls are covered in black stains. The walls, which aren't so visible, but you can see from our premises, are actually just made with plywood, which hasn't got any kind of coating on it, no weather protection. It's all rotting and peeling off. It's not even a construction method that would be good enough for a garden shed. The roofs are all covered in sludge because they don't drain properly. The gutters leak. Everything that you can imagine is wrong with it. This is the tree that was removed as soon as they acquired this site, and this is round the back of the outside inn. The bins and the rubbish, which is all spilled over the roads, broken glass everywhere, blocking the pavement. They just have no regard for the area whatsoever. And that's all I have to say.
All right, thanks, Mr. Tarrant. I wonder, I'm sorry if you went out, Councillor Stagg, and didn't get the chance to be involved here, but could one of you pass the pictures down? Mr. Tarrant, perhaps you'd be kind enough to pass them down to Councillor Fielding there. He's the one with the glasses, and the members can look round as the discussion ensues. So we'll be hanging on to that because that's the evidence now which we're basing our decision on. Is that all right?
Yeah, those are all to hang on to. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Hanna.
Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant PV Developments in support of the outline application for 163 flats which your officers have recommended for approval. As outlined in your officers' very comprehensive report, the proposed development follows the precedent of residential accommodation established in this area. The principal development is supported by officers, as the site is located in a sustainable location within the urban area of Portsmouth. It would constitute the reuse of existing buildings for the provision of dwellings, which in itself is highly sustainable. The development of this site would make a significant contribution to the existing shortfall in housing supply in the city. The committee report sets out how the proposed development accords with adopted national planning policy. The reuse of this site also echoes the objective of the NPPF to promote sustainable development. The applicant is a well-versed property developer and long-term investor in the rental market, and is such in tune with the environmental issues we are all facing and the global need to reduce our carbon emissions. As such, we had originally sought an environmentally sustainable car-free development. However, on-site parking is now being provided in response to concern on parking provision from officers. This is reinforced by ample cycle storage and a car club facility for residents. The site is also located within a highly accessible area and has immediate access to public transport and residential amenities, which would facilitate this type of development. Detailed pre-application discussions were undertaken with your officers prior to submission to ensure that the design enhancement to local regeneration of the area of Summertown and Central Portsmouth. The scheme is also being reviewed numerous times by a design review panel for comment, and its feedback was incorporated into the design along with officer comments. The scheme is being carefully designed to protect the amenity of neighbouring residents. The site forms part of an identified regeneration site, with the area being suitable for high-rise development, with numerous examples of tall buildings in the area, as noted by the planning officer in their committee report. Furthermore, the proposed height variations of the blocks would break up the overall visual mass of the development and is further mitigated by stepping down to the south. Following discussions with your officers, the applicant is open to the principle of providing open space contribution towards parks, subject to the viability of the development and contingent on the Parks Department's response. The development does also include rooftop terraces, balconies and a landscaped scheme for the residents as amenity. In accordance with the Summerstown Court regeneration area, the proposed development includes flexible commercial units on the ground floor. The proposed commercial space is estimated to allow for 41 employees, an increase of 9 employees over the existing provision. The applicant has discussed the proposals with existing occupiers, and some of these do support the scheme. Within the design of the scheme, we have allowed for occupiers to be rehoused or irrelevant within the same location with the same type of facilities, services and access. The inclusion of flexible uses as well would allow the development to easily respond to changes in the market and would facilitate the long-term vitality of the area. As detailed in the planning application, the proposal includes opportunities to enhance habitat provision on site, such as the provision of creating vegetation areas and bird and bat nesting sites. The applicant is working with officers to produce the Section 106 agreement, which includes contributions towards the protection of local special protection areas, nitrates and bird avoidance, as well as securing a travel plan and other contributions where relevant. In conclusion, the proposed development will result in the regeneration of a brownfield site in a sustainable location. The principle of development is considered acceptable by your officers and statutory consultees. The proposed development accords with relevant national and local planning policies and should therefore be approved. The applicant is an experienced provider of long-term rental property, and development would go a long way to providing much needed local housing. The properties would be well managed and maintained, ensuring a good living environment for the occupants. In view of your officer's recommendation for approval and the positive addition this scheme would make to Portsmouth, we respectfully request that the application be approved, subject to the conditions suggested by your officer.
Okay then, so general questions. So I have a quick question. The Highways, just to confirm, the Highways Authority offers no objection. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct. They raised some concerns about the parking level, sure, but actually no objection.
Indeed. And could I ask, one day, do you reckon, sorry to add to your burden, but we do hear about bird and bat boxes a lot, and we press this particular issue, but do you reckon we could have a summary one day of sort of how many bird and bat boxes have gone in since we've been considering these sorts of things, and including Swift boxes, because it'd be nice to get the feedback that it's actually happened.
Chairman, we'll look at that for you, of course.
Much obliged. Members, Councillor Stubbs, and then Councillor Hooper, then Councillor Atwell.
I just want to ask about the tall buildings policy, which I think is one of the ones relevant to this. So I've just opened up in front of me the tall buildings SPD 2012. I think, and it's right on the margin, it's quite a small map, but I think this site is just outside the identified areas of opportunity. Can you confirm that? I think by nodding that you are. And then just explain from a policy position where the starting point is on tall buildings, also bearing in mind the presumption in favour of sustainable development that we're operating under.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, correct. It's just outside the area of opportunity for tall buildings, and the officers addressed that in the report. Notwithstanding that policy, we will still look at the detailed context of any application site. So in this instance, with the other tall buildings in the area, the Eldon building is a very tall 5 stories, being not residential, and the 8 and 12, 14-storey buildings to the immediate north, student accommodation that you've seen. Leamington House, just the immediate west, 18 stories. So, notwithstanding the policy, we feel the local context is able to support some buildings in this range of 6 to 11 stories. And then you helpfully pointed to sustainable development. This is edge of city centre, with excellent public transport, buses, ferries, trains, of course, and has got access to all the amenities, shops, employment, etc. that the city centre offers. So it is the right sort of site that should be able to accept, subject to local details that I've taken you through, more dense and possibly taller development. So that's why we felt we were able to recommend it positively.
Is that satisfactory, Councillor Stubbs? Okay. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for Mr. Tarrant, if I can speak to him directly, and then I'd like to ask the officer something. Is that okay?
Yeah,
can I speak to Mr. Tarrant?
Chair, members should be addressing the questions to officers, not the applicants and objectors.
Okay.
Oh, so I can't speak to the gentleman that's
Not
brought
really,
evidence before
not really.
us? I find that quite shocking, actually.
It's one of the rules of the committee, but if you can direct the question first of all there,
Okay.
and then we'll see how we might get round it.
All right. I really like to be able to speak to members of the public. I find that very, very odd. I know that's not your fault. That's
No,
the following
indeed.
procedure.
What happens,
because we are here to work with these
indeed.
people.
What happens, Councillor Hoop, is unfortunately the meetings, we've seen it before, not in your time so far, it starts to get unruly.
Okay.
And arguments break out and things go a bit wrong. But let's see how we get on.
Yeah, it's related to the application. It's not unruly.
No, I don't doubt that for a moment, but things get out of hand sometimes.
Well, I'll try and perhaps this gentleman might be able to help me on both fronts then. Just want to ask for your expertise on this paragraph in Mr. Tarrant's document here. Now, I may have missed it when I read through. Affordable housing provision. The expected yield would be 30% affordable housing in a scheme of this size to fit the required profile. TS claims it is not financially viable and will offer 0 dwellings. Somerstown is a deprived area where affordable housing is desperately needed. Could you please comment on that paragraph? Yeah, I'd like to know what the status quo on this is and if this is true, because clearly we do need more affordable housing.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, wouldn't dispute that last point. Yes, the policy expectation is 30% of the units, total number of units, to be affordable housing, ideally provided on-site, if not off-site. But we're back to the viability, the financial viability of a scheme. So any developer will submit to us if they feel they cannot provide any or some affordable housing in compliance with the policy, because in their opinion the financial viability doesn't stretch that far, then we will have to properly assess that, of course, and that is the independent consultant we referred to earlier on. So the applicant will submit their viability assessment,
and then we will appoint an independent consultant to assess that in turn. And that was what I mentioned about the difference of opinions about the myriad different elements of viability. But jumping forward, in the end, we concluded that the viability of this scheme was at about 15% profit on gross development value, which is at the lower end. So it's a different percentage to the 30% affordable housing. So 163 units, our policy expectation will be 30%. So of those 163 units, so that would be around about 48, 49 units. Affordable housing, yeah, of one sort or another. Different percentages, moving to viability, that's where the 15 to 20% range profit is what a scheme is expected to achieve. If they're not achieving that, here we think it's around 15%. It's at the bottom, and those are national figures in national guidance. The local planning authority cannot force the developer to provide affordable housing. The local planning authority, in this instance, is satisfied that at 15% we can't force the developer to provide affordable housing and achieve its expected profit, a reasonable profit, in order to bring development forward. But that is the purpose of the review mechanism. Because this is a big scheme and will take some time, if it's allowed, to come forward and to be occupied, construction costs will change, as they are a lot at the moment. Excuse me. Sales values may change. There are various factors that will change. So the sums we've had in front of us up to now will change, and that's what the review mechanism is. They have to go through as they develop and get real sums, real actual values of sales, real actual costs. At the end of the development, or towards the end of the development, we'll know exactly whether or not they gained 15% or 16 or 14 or whatever it may be. If they emerge over the 15%, then there is some money available for affordable housing. That's an if. So that is the review mechanism to investigate that as it comes.
And have they agreed the review mechanism now? Because that wasn't clear from earlier.
They have indeed. That's in the SMAT, yes, thank you.
Yes, sorry. Do you want to carry on, Councillor Hooper?
So because of all these commercial factors that you've brought up, the council are basing the 15% decision upon that?
We consider that the scheme as shown would achieve about 15% profit. The planning inspector will look at this very carefully as well, I can assure you.
Sorry, I'm sorry, it's probably me getting confused. 30% affordable housing, but you're saying 15%.
Okay, I'll separate two things out, that's all right. 30% affordable housing is 30% of units. That's the policy expectation.
I know
so
that much.
if you had 100 units, you'd expect 30 of them to be affordable housing, if the scheme can afford it.
Right.
Okay, so that's, in this instance, my quick mental arithmetic was around about 49 units. If we park that for one moment, don't worry so much about the percentages, but that would be 49 units, say. And then moving on to separate set of figures is the viability of the actual scheme and what profit it may result in. And that's the 15% that we think this scheme would result in.
So crucially, you know, what tests are in place to say what can be afforded and what can't be afforded? I just, you know, it's just at the moment someone's opinion, depending on what the market could do and the cost of it's not concrete, is it? But 30% of you know 49 dwellings in this area would be really valuable affordable housing.
It's not concrete, hence the review. I mean, the applicant's appraisal came forward with, they thought it would be about 8%. As I said earlier, every consultant will have slight or greater disagreements on the different values and costs and so on. But ultimately, we'll take our own independent advice from our consultant. We'll test it as well until we're happy that the advice we're receiving is good advice. But that is the whole point of the review, Councillor. So at the moment, they're not gaining enough profit in order to provide affordable housing. That's a normal national thing. It's unfortunate. But should the scheme actually, once it's built out, derive more profit than that, then some of that can come forward for actual affordable housing.
But you are taking the developer's word for that, aren't you? It's not sort of an objective view that you're taking. It's based upon what the developer is putting forward, and developers obviously do put profit first. And I understand that they need to, but we also have, obviously, a community issue here. That's just to try and find that balance. That's just a point I'd like to make.
No, Councillor, no, absolutely. We take our own independent advice to scrutinise it and test it, absolutely. So you can be assured that that is independent advice that we've received, and we've tested as well.
Okay, so it's been looked at independently. What we need to do, fellows and ladies, is I think we need a bit of a training, particularly around because we've got new members here, they've not had the benefit of learning about viability. And I think we also need to look at tall buildings because the circumstances are changing. So we need a bit of training around this. Because for those, we've got new members about and need to look at this quite complex. Councillor Hooper.
Well, my concern actually was about the tests. And I have never ever heard of, how we are testing, how we are scrutinising a developer on these figures, on this 30% figure if they can't afford it. So I just wanted to find out how that was done, because I think that is key to our residents who will need this affordable housing. Okay, how are you pushing these developers? They can't afford the 30%. Well, what are the tests? So I think that was a logical question to ask.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely, and a completely fair question. Bearing in mind the council's policy is 30%. Some places have dropped it to 20%, and some places have dropped it down further to actually get something out of it. But this council does, indeed, this council doesn't seem to want to do that, and I understand why. I'll come to you in just for a moment. Just to re-emphasise what the officers have said, it's in the report. It's been looked at by an independent consultant, and they've come up with more or less the same opinion of the developer and indeed the council's officers. I think that's correct, isn't it, gentlemen? Is there anything you wanted to add to any of this, Simon?
That's it, thank you.
Councillor Hooper.
Obviously really disappointed I can't speak to Mr. Tarrant directly, so let's see if this young man can help me with this part of the inquiry. It wouldn't have turned contentious, I just had some questions about his actual job role. Thank you very much to Mr. Tarrant for coming here today. I do appreciate the small man standing up for himself. I think it's essential in society, especially when people don't think they're listened to, or perhaps they think they're being bullied. You've got to have your say. What I would like to say is these artisan, and I am a fan of period buildings, by the way, which is, a lot of people know that, but these artisan skills like glass restoration and even, creating new stained glass windows, they are really essential skills, okay? And I am concerned about the impact of this scheme on these neighbours. So I'm sure this young man can't answer this particular question, but I was interested in finding out more about Mr. Tarrant's business and the actual impact on him. For example, what sort of building is he currently in? How many people does he employ?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I spoke to Mr. Tarrant's parents, actually, when the application came in, about precisely these points. And what I made very clear to them, and I think they understood from the outset, was that's a matter outside the planning application. We're dealing with the planning merits of a planning application, a development proposal. Ultimately, it's up to the landowner and whatever leases they may have with the lessees, in this instance, as to whether or not an occupier remains or stays or whatever. So right from the outset, I think the Tarrants understood that. I certainly advised them to take formal advice from a surveyor or estate agent or other such professional on their lease and their rights for the property, and that is entirely up to those private parties outside of the planning application.
Go ahead.
But it is right, of course, isn't it, that we think about the impact on other local people, especially if families and businesses have been here for years. And it's, as I said, these are artisan skills, and we don't want to lose this particular skills base for our city. That's just the point that I wanted to make.
Councillor Fielding, then Councillor Atwell.
I just wanted to understand the process that we're actually going through today, because obviously we're not making the decision on this. Is this forming a submission to the Planning Inspectorate? And if so, what has actually changed in terms of the application that came before us previously, which was refused by this council, by this committee? Because if there's been no change on that, how can we then be recommending it for approval? Especially when it comes to our previous reasons for rejection was around loss of employment land. Whether there's any comments to be made on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, whatever the decision of this committee today will be communicated to the Planning Inspectorate. Exactly that. So that will be the council's formal position on what it would have decided if the appeal had not been in train. So that's an important piece of information for the Planning Inspectorate to take into account when they consider the appeal. That was the first question you had. The difference to refusal, to be clear, the scheme in front of you today is not the same site as the refused scheme. The refused scheme was the Blue Edge site, if you remember from the location plan, next door to this site. So different sites. So they are both for appeal now. The first one, the 4-storey student accommodation, is up for appeal because it was refused by the local planning authority. And the one in front of you today is non-determination appeal. I suspect the Inspectorate will be sensible to look at them together and in conjunction, and we'll probably get decision notices at the same sort of time.
So, okay, Councillor, all right. And then I had Councillor Atwell. Sorry, Ashmore, I think. Councillor Ashmore, then Councillor Atwell. I beg your pardon.
I did have my hand up, Chair, but Councillor Hooper actually asked what I was going to, so thank you.
Councillor Atwell.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Stubbs asked far more eloquently than I could the point that I wanted to make. So.
All right then, Councillor Smith.
I've just got one other point from what's been said so far. With the open spaces on the roofs, are they accessible to, will they be accessible to all people in the buildings?
Gosh, I haven't seen that detail, Councillor, but I'm pretty sure they would be. But that could be a detailed matter that could be tied up at the appeal. So I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't like to guess, but I would have thought so, because I don't think there'd be any distinction in the occupiers, different flats in occupation in the building. So I would have expected everyone to have access to them.
It's just that there's very little outside space, so I just wanted to find that point. Thank you.
Right. We seem to be there with questions. I think one of the things, I'd sympathise with, because the application site was so close to the other one, when I first started reading it, I thought it was indeed that one too. But you've heard it isn't, it's next door. But the sorts of issues around employment land, in my opinion, are still valid. But we see here that there's the report says that there will be the applicant says there will be an increase of about 3 or 4. And how a building relates, in my opinion, to the ground is important. So we haven't got flats coming all the way down. We've got a busy sort of frontage going along there. The one thing that has changed, of course, is that the government wants us to build... I've got you, Councillor New. You're after me, yeah? Okay. Wants us to build 17,000 homes. So we are going to see more, whether we like it or not, any of us like it or not, and I sympathise with you, sir, hugely, but a lot of decisions are going to be made which are going to be unpopular because the government wants us to build these 17,700 homes, and that's the starting point, as far as I understand. So things are going to change. For example, I think it drives the coach and horses through our parking standards, because, you know, if we applied the parking standards currently, we won't be able to deliver these 17,700 homes. The point about the, in my opinion, the point about the viability assessments, will do a bit of a training day because it is a complex area, and it's good to understand better how it's arrived at. We did hear previously we wouldn't get anything in Kingston Prison, but because the council pushed and pushed and pushed, it's now 30% affordable housing there, but there is a review mechanism here. It's surprising to me that the Highway Authority raises no objection, but we hear how this relates, how we have good bus services, raised to the city centre, and we're going to see this argument come to us more and more and more as we have to consider more and more applications for these 17,700 dwellings. So I sympathise with a huge amount of what you said, Mr. Tarrant, that has said there is a national policy that's coming, and it's obliging us to consider all these sorts of applications for taller buildings. Ironically, Horatio, at the time the council's bringing things down to ground level, more human scale, the government wants us to go, would appear to want us to go the other way, and the only other way is up, because you can work it out for yourselves. Anyway, there you are. So with that, I'm going to move the officer's report, which says that had there been no appeal against non-determination and subject to the applicant's agreement to the suggested head of terms below, etc., etc., etc. So I'm moving those recommendations. I don't think we have any alternative, really. So I've moved the officer's report. Do I need to add anything to it, Mrs. Gill, that proposition?
I think there are other members who need...
Yeah, I know. I'm just moving it.
Yes, subject to the updates in the SMAT.
And subject to the updates in the SMAT. So I've moved it. Councillor New.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to comment on this. So when I initially read through the pack for today's meeting, I wanted to support this development. For many of the reasons that have been discussed today, we do need more housing. To pick on the points that Councillor Hooper very eloquently put to officers, and for fear of turning into a bit of a socialist, actually, we do need more affordable housing. I spoke about this in our full council meeting. It is a real problem. Now, we spoke specifically on Lennox Point, but that's not really, I don't really want to get into that, but it's a point that I made to officers at briefings and then again at the full council. When we're looking at using the term of affordable housing, I think it's fairly dangerous as well, because, well, everything's affordable to someone, you know, and so I think that we need to start being quite clear about social housing and what is truly affordable. That also brings me on to the points that Mr. Tarrant brought up in his deputation, which, with the evidence that he submitted to us, I mean, it's just turned my stomach. And I think this is a problem that we're seeing more and more and more, not just here in Portsmouth, across the entire country, of developers that are building stuff for greed. And I appreciate the officer's explanation on the testing that they've explained today. I think in all my years, actually, of sitting on the planning committee, you've explained it in probably the most simplistic way for everyone to understand. So I thank you for that. But we're still faced with that problem of developers saying we need to make a minimum of 15% profit, etc., etc. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. And as a result, we want to bypass your policy. We don't want to build affordable housing to the 30% standard that your council actually expects. That is not right, in my opinion, and I thank you for your points that you outlined to us, that the planning inspector will take it into due consideration and put quite a lot of weight onto that. That's really welcome to hear, because I have to say, I mean, I know that this isn't a material planning issue that we're considering today, it's what's going to go forward to the planning inspector, but when you look at these pictures here and you see these awful, cheap building materials, all of us in all of our wards will be able to look at this and say, oh, yeah, do you know what, I've seen this in recent new builds. It can't be right. And the argument as well with regards to employment land, I think it further impacts us. Now, Councillor Hunt, you're absolutely right. We're going to have to build more houses. The 17,000 figure is pie in the sky, and as we know, government ministers have written to the MPs, to Stephen Morgan MP and Penny Mordaunt MP, saying we're more than happy to look at revising this down. You know, I guess to a degree they must know that it's unsustainable. But that also brings me on to the point of, within the local plan, that's where we've been told that this is the place where we can address these housing numbers. And I don't want to get into a back and forth, but I was alarmed yesterday to see that our council are targeting Southampton residents to take part in our own local plan. Now that's going to skew things. So when you're going through the parts about housing, if you're in Southampton, of course you're going to go, oh yeah, brilliant, Portsmouth can have a 17,000 housing, to the point that I had to write to the chief executive last night saying, this is not acceptable, get your house in order. The local plan is supposed to be for Portsmouth people to be able to address the issues that we've got here, and as we've been told by government ministers and our two respective MPs, they've been advised that is the correct method to do it through, so we must ensure that we do that. It's with a heavy heart that I finish on saying that I can't support the officer's recommendation on this, for all the reasons that Mr Tarrant has outlined, for the reasons that Councillor Hooper has put forward to officers, and then the answers that you've very graciously provided back to us. So that's my position on this, but thank you, and thank you, Chair, as well, because I do think you made some very good points today.
Yeah, thanks for that. And on the bit about the Southampton business, we've had a report back from Regeneration. They've apologised. It was intended to go there. There was some glitch or another in the way it's done by the company concerned, and so that was unintended. Rather like when some parties' leaflets also go to other parts of the country, things happen like that. All right. So we're not involved in Southampton, but if they want to comment on our plan, they're more than welcome, I suppose. Who is next? I've got Councillor Ashmore, then Councillor Stubbs.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to, as I said before, I was going to mention about the question that Councillor Hooper brought up about affordable housing, because we've heard this so many times, haven't we, where you see these big developments coming up and you think, well, how many affordable housings, and they say, oh, due to the formula, none. And I think, personally in Somerstown, where they'd be crying out for things like that, I think that's incredible, to be honest with you. And then you get the thing, and I know it's not material to planning permission, but but the influx of cars that will come on that will need somewhere to go, and that does worry me, the effect on the infrastructure there. Councillor Newey up there has mentioned about the 17,000 homes. We'll be seeing more and more things come in like this, which we won't like, but they'll have to be put into areas, to basically like a cram them in strategy. Portsmouth is a finite island. They need to go somewhere. So I think, as we've been arguing, we should have a target that's set locally, that's more appropriate. That wouldn't have that kind of burden on us. So I think on the basis of all those things, and on the basis of that very eloquent and well done deputation over there, I think, by Mr Tarrant, and on what can be a material thing for the planning, it isn't in keeping with the area, in my opinion, and of all the things that Councillor Newey said as well, I don't feel I can support it either. I'm sorry, but I just don't feel I can.
Oh, you don't have to apologise to me. Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you, Chairman. When I read the report, when I saw this on the agenda, actually my first instinct was to think I'll probably abstain. And I thought that is because it's going to go to the planning inspectorate anyway. And so that's actually where the decision's going to be made. And so, why not just do that? And I still might. I mean, it does bother me actually one of the things that bothers me the most about this application is it's taken 3 years. I mean, I know there's been problems, and yes, there was problems with nitrates and there's problems with COVID and so on, but 3 years for a determination on the planning application when you have a 13-week window to turn them around, and it's taken 3 years and we're only just getting to it, is really very worrying. And it potentially, anyway, reduces the impact this council can have on decisions, because decisions aren't just about the decisions which are made in the planning committee, but they are the negotiations between the developer and the council officers in advance of this in order to secure a positive recommendation. If you are a developer and you now think, well, I'm going to have to appeal for non-determination anyway, then there's no point in going through the haggling. Why worry? Just go straight to the inspectorate and see what you get knocked back on at the inspectorate and make those tweaks only. So I do find that worrying. From a policy perspective, I mean, I have to say I have a lot of sympathy with the officers' views, certainly on heights. I mean, there are tall buildings all around it, and I acknowledge the pressure that there's going to be for housing completions, and also that the new local plan, which is, yes, it's still in draft and consultation, so on, places great emphasis, not unjustifiably, with development in the city centre, and this is part of the city centre. In terms of parking, the level of parking provision is, if you look at all the applications that are going to come in over the next 10 years around the city centre, the truth is that most of them, I suspect, won't have any parking at all. So to secure some level of parking here, I think, is actually, and I know people will say that it should be a lot more, but I see that as a little bit of a win, quite honestly. The commercial space, that is a big worry. I am concerned about the loss of the existing businesses, and we've seen plenty of places where commercial space has been created under office buildings because of residential buildings, and because of the new world that we're in, no one's opening shops now. Probably we're going to see no one opening offices anymore either. And so, you can see all around commercial space created under buildings which has been left unlet. I mean, I saw that just the other week on Gosport High Street, that you can see it in multiple places, and so it is a worry that you're replacing actual jobs with theoretical jobs, and that is the thing on this application which concerns me the most. From a policy perspective, of course, can we do anything about that legally without overstepping our powers? That's the hard bit. Certainly, this is an outline application. If we get to the point of a detailed application, it will be very important to nail down the materials so that to try to minimise the impact of how they age over time. Absolutely. I mean, water stains on rendered buildings and so forth can look really dreadful. They often don't take that long to appear. Buildings 5-10 years old suddenly can look like quite an eyesore, and that's something which needs to be looked at. And I think, and I don't know if this is still the case, and it was, but I don't know if anything has changed, that this land, or at least some of it, is the council's freehold ownership. So if that is the case, then there is other controls which has nothing to do with this committee, which could be looked at. So my view is I'm really quite torn on this. I think I'm going to second Councillor Hull's proposal so we can at least go to a vote on it, but I'm still torn over whether to abstain.
Any others would like to say anything or not? I mean, yeah, so we had a debate in the council, didn't we? Complaining the administration was not delivering on these housing targets. And here we have an application today for 163 flats. And it looks to me as though it will probably go under. That's a consideration of the committee. But if the planning committee is going to start to be the barrier, or attempt to be the barrier, I mean, you can't blame the administration if it's trying to deliver these houses, or wants to deliver these houses, and then, in other words, you can't have your cake and eat it over this. These applications that come through with the same sorts of arguments around parking and around viability, and we looks like we're going to continue our 30% demand. As I said earlier on, some places have brought it down to 20% and lower to actually achieve some sort of affordable housing. So there we are. Anyway, we're going to go to the vote now. So the proposition to which was described earlier on, all those in favour, please. Oh, I beg your pardon. Is there anybody who wants to move a proposition against this? I've heard people talking not for it, but is there any proposition to move a motion against approval? No. Okay, so all those in favour of the report, please show their hands. That is 4. And those against, please show their hands. And that is 4. Therefore, I get to use my casting vote, which is for the report. Okay, so that matter's resolved now. Okay. So now we move on to the last item, which is, I think it's the QA report. No, can you pop your microphone on?
Yes, of course, Chair. I believe we've just members just left. I wondered whether they were leaving for this application. They didn't want to be part of it, because if they leave at the start, they're left for the whole item, aren't they?
I think he's left to either take a call or go to the facilities.
Indeed, he didn't say anything, and I'll give it a minute or two if you like. Just to... Sorry? Okay then. All right. 10 minutes. 5 minutes, if that's all right. 5 minutes. So back by 10 past, according to these clocks. Okay, Jane, are we all set? Very good. So on the last item, members, which is the Queen Alexandra Hospital item on page 8458 of your reports, which is about the one I started off with, the boundary treatment and the hedges and so on. Gents, who's doing this one? Ed. Oh, over to you, Ed.
Chairman, Councillors, thank you. This application, reference 21-01150 VOC, is at Queen Alexandra Hospital and is an application to remove condition 14 from planning permission 21-0232 FUL in relation to boundary planting. As on the slide in front of you, this condition 14 was imposed by the committee when they were determining application 21-00232 for the multi-storey car park, in order to provide or require the developer to provide additional planting along the western boundary to enhance landscaping and to protect the amenity of neighbouring residents. As set out in the officer's report, a second, sorry. As set out in the officer's report, however, it's been determined that, based on further survey work, that it is now not possible to provide that additional planting due to the presence of high voltage electrical services running under the ground where the proposed trees were proposed. And that therefore limits the space available for tree planting and hence obviates the need for the condition. Just to remind you of the location where we're talking about, so the site of the car park is outlined with the red rectangle. The proposed planting was was to bolster the existing tree screen on the side of Boston Road there, properties, Cavill Drive, etc. This slide hopefully shows a bit more detail with the purple oval sort of indicating where there are gaps in the existing trees that were proposed to be filled. This slide shows some of the existing planting, admittedly taken when the trees are in leaf, and these were taken in conjunction with the application for the multi-storey car park that was approved earlier this year. You'll note in the officer report that in the planning history section that a non-material amendment was approved in May this year, and amongst other things that included the addition of some additional tree planting immediately adjacent to the building itself, so on the east side of the road, and that's shown on the green areas immediately to the east of the building. And yeah, that's essentially it. So the considerations are that due to the presence of the high voltage cables, which provide, and the cables themselves provide power to the hospital, it is unfortunately not going to be possible to provide the additional tree planting that condition 14 sought, and hence it is the application to remove it is before you today. Thank you.
Members, there you have it. Not possible to do it. Any questions? Comments then, so I move the officer's report as and the recommendations outlined in the report. Anybody like to make any comment or argument? Councillor Fielding.
Obviously it's disappointing that they're not able to proceed with the tree planting, but given the circumstances, it would be interesting if there's alternatives. I know they've talked about hedging, but that would only be at the height of probably a boundary fence. So I think we've just got to weigh it up really as to...
It's the cabling that's gone on, under the utility cabling that's gone underneath. So to put anything there, I imagine, would interfere with that at some time in the future. Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, I would just add that there is an additional safety concern here. I did refer the case, as Councillor New will know, to Penny Mordaunt's office. I love planting councillor building, I think it's essential, but the issue is we have had a lot of wood scattered across Southwark Hill Road with the downdraft of the helicopters coming in. So actually planting around there can also have additional safety issues with the, obviously the emergency helicopter. So, yeah, it's certainly something that, it's affected people using the road. I know that for sure.
And we see that there's 4 trees, so they try to help. So it's unfortunate, but there we are. So anyway, there's no more debate, I take it.
There is a deputation.
I'm so sorry, it's got to be read out. You're dead right. I didn't see anybody, so could the deputation please be read out? Thank you, Ed, for that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a deputation made by Brian Kavanagh, who's the planning consultant for the hospital. Letter dated 15th of October.
Can I just remember, have you all read it? I've read it, we've all read it.
Okay.
Is that okay, Ed?
Yep, taken it as read, fine. And essentially I covered all the issues in my presentation anyway. Thank you.
There's only one outcome with this one anyway, so all those in favour of the officers' report, please show. I proposed it, so I need a second there. Catherine, you. Thank you. All those in agreement, thank you very much indeed. Members, that concludes the meeting today. I've asked officers to arrange a training day so that we can all learn a bit more about viability and so on. There are new members around, so the whole council, I hope the whole council will be invited to that, and so we can better understand our taller buildings, policies as well. I think those are 2 things that we're going to have to arm ourselves with over the next year or 2. Okay, so look out for that. Thank you very much for coming along today.